Serena Whitmore, 34 years old. That was the name printed on my hospital badge, stitched into the white coat I wore through 12-hour surgeries, emergency pages at 3 a.m., and the kind of nights where I came home smelling faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion. To most people at Metropolitan General Hospital, I was Dr. Whitmore, cardiac surgeon, steady hands, calm voice, the woman they called when someone's heart was failing and there wasn't time for fear. But at home, I was supposed to be just Serena. Julian Mercer used to say that was the version of me he loved most. Not the surgeon, not the woman everyone praised for saving lives. Just Serena, barefoot in the kitchen, hair tied up badly, eating cold noodles from a takeout box, while he leaned against the counter and told me I worked too hard. Back then, he said it like he admired me. Later, he said it like an accusation. Julian was 32, a marketing consultant who worked freelance from our condo. He was charming in the effortless way that made strangers trust him within 5 minutes. He remembered birthdays, picked the right wine, knew how to make a room feel warmer just by stepping into it. For the first few years, I thought we balanced each other. I carried the weight of operating rooms and waiting families. He carried laughter, spontaneity, softness. When my schedule collapsed under emergency surgeries, he sent voice notes saying, "Save lives, babe. I'll be here when you get home." I believed him. That was my first mistake. Over the last year, something changed. His patience became resentment. His jokes sharpened. If I missed dinner because a patient crashed, he didn't ask if the patient survived anymore. He asked why I even bothered making plans. "You always choose them," he said one night, standing in our bedroom doorway while I sat on the edge of the bed, still in scrubs. "I don't choose anyone over you," I said. "I'm doing my job." "No," he replied quietly. "You're hiding inside your job." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. I tried to fix things the way I fixed everything. Carefully, responsibly, with both hands steady. I scheduled date nights. I requested vacation days. I came home with flowers even when I was too tired to speak. I suggested couples therapy. Julian laughed at that. So now I need therapy because I want a girlfriend who actually comes home? The word girlfriend landed strangely. Not partner. Not the woman he loved. Girlfriend. Like I was failing an audition. I told myself he was lonely. I told myself love required patience. I told myself that because my work was demanding, I had to be the one to bend more. Then, 3 weeks ago, a surgery was postponed. It was rare, almost impossible. A free evening dropped into my life like a small miracle. I bought dinner from Julian's favorite Thai restaurant, balanced the paper bag against my hip, and let myself imagine his face when I walked in early. The condo was quiet when I opened the door. Too quiet. Then I heard his voice from the living room. Soft. Low. Intimate. "I miss you too," he said. I stopped in the hallway. A woman's laugh floated from his laptop. Familiar, though I couldn't place it at first. Julian said, "Thursday should work. Serena's on call again." My fingers tightened around the takeout bag. The woman answered, "You always say that like it's a tragedy. I think it's convenient." Then Julian laughed. Not the laugh he used with clients. Not the polite one. The real one. I stepped into the living room. Julian looked up, and every bit of color left his face. On the laptop screen was a woman with auburn hair, red lipstick, and the kind of smile that disappeared the second she saw me. Vanessa Hale, Julian's former coworker, his ex-girlfriend. He slammed the laptop shut so fast the sound cracked through the room. For a moment, none of us existed except in silence. Then I set the food on the table and asked, "What was that?" Julian stood. "You're home early." That wasn't my question. He rubbed his face, already annoyed, already preparing a version of the truth he thought I might accept. "It was just Vanessa," he said. "She's been going through a hard time. People going through hard times don't usually plan around my call schedule." His expression hardened. "You were listening?" I walked into my own home. He looked toward the closed laptop, then back at me. "This is exactly what I mean. You're never here, and when you are, you act like an investigator." The room tilted slightly. I asked him plainly, "Are you having an affair with her?" He scoffed. "Wow." "Answer me." You hear 2 sentences and jump straight to that? I heard enough. "No, Serena. You heard what your guilt wanted to hear." That was Julian's gift. He could take a knife out of his own hand and convince you it had always been in yours. I asked to see his phone. That was when he exploded. He said I had no right. He said privacy mattered. He said if I trusted him, I wouldn't need proof. Then he paced the living room for nearly an hour, listing every missed dinner, every canceled weekend, every night I fell asleep before he finished talking. By the end, somehow, my question about Vanessa had become a trial about my career. But I did not move. I did not apologize. And eventually, his anger ran out of places to hide. Yes, he said finally. Something happened. Something. The smallest word for the biggest wound. With Vanessa? I asked. He looked away. It's not what you think. It never is. He admitted it slowly, then all at once. Lunches, hotel rooms, late-night calls, messages I was apparently too exhausted to notice. 6 months, he said. Only 6. As if betrayal came with a mercy discount if measured correctly. I waited for remorse. It never came. Instead, Julian sat across from me and said, "You need to understand what it's like being with someone who is never available." I stared at him. She was there, he continued. She listened. She made me feel wanted. It was stress relief, Serena. Emotional support. You weren't giving me that. The words were so absurdly calm that, for a second, I wondered if grief had damaged my hearing. You cheated on me, I said. He winced, not because he was ashamed, but because he disliked the word. I found support. You slept with your ex-girlfriend. You abandoned me long before that. There it was. The twist of the blade. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking me to agree that I had caused it. Then he said something I will never forget. I think we can still work, he told me, voice gentle now, as though offering a compromise. But you have to be realistic. Your career isn't changing. My needs aren't disappearing. Maybe Vanessa doesn't have to be this huge threat if we're honest about what she provides. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the smell of Thai food going cold, the strange calm that came over me when my heart finally understood what my mind had been resisting. Julian did not want to repair what he broke. He wanted permission to keep breaking it. That night, I moved into the guest room. He didn't stop me. He only said, "Don't make this dramatic, Serena." But as I closed the door behind me, I realized something colder than anger had begun to settle inside me. Clarity. The next morning, Julian acted as if we'd merely had a disagreement about bills or vacation plans. He stood in the kitchen making coffee, while I leaned against the counter in yesterday's sweatshirt, barely able to process the fact that the man I had loved for 5 years had calmly suggested outsourcing intimacy like it was a gym membership. "You should eat something," he said casually. I looked at him. Not with anger anymore. With confusion. How could someone detonate a relationship and still expect breakfast afterward? Julian slid a mug toward me. "I know you're upset."
Upset.
Not betrayed. Not devastated. Just upset. "Vanessa understands emotional complexity better than you do," he continued carefully. "You see things too rigidly. Everything's right or wrong with you." I laughed once. A short, exhausted sound that didn't feel human. "You cheated on me for 6 months." His jaw tightened. "That's not all this is." "No," I said quietly. "Apparently it's my fault, too." He exhaled sharply and walked away like I was being unreasonable. That entire week felt surreal. I slept in the guest room while Julian continued moving around the condo as though nothing fundamental had changed. He still asked if I wanted coffee, still reminded me about packages arriving downstairs, still texted me grocery lists. And every night I heard his phone vibrate through the wall. Every night I wondered if Vanessa was on the other side of those messages. What disturbed me most wasn't just the affair. It was the absence of guilt. Julian never cried, never apologized, never begged me not to leave. Instead, he explained why loneliness changed people, why emotional needs couldn't be ignored, why my schedule created impossible conditions for commitment. By the 4th day, he actually said, most people in our situation would try to adapt instead of throwing everything away.
Adapt.
Like infidelity was bad weather. I contacted an attorney the next morning. Her name was Clara Blackthorne. Sharp-eyed, controlled. The kind of woman who looked at problems like they were already solved, provided people stopped lying long enough. After hearing the situation, Clara folded her hands and asked one question. Do you believe he's telling you the full truth? I thought about Julian's calm face, his rehearsed explanations, the speed with which he blamed me. No, I admitted. Clara nodded once. Then we verify everything. Because Julian and I weren't married, the process wasn't technically divorce, but we owned property together, shared accounts, shared investments, shared financial obligations. Untangling our lives would still become a legal war if he chose to make it one. And judging by his personality, he would. The first major crack appeared 3 days later. Julian had gone to meet a client. He forgot his tablet at home. I stared at it for almost 20 minutes before touching it. Part of me still wanted to be wrong. Part of me still hoped I'd discover something small enough to survive. Instead, I found Vanessa. Hundreds of messages. No hesitation. No secrecy once the screen unlocked. Their entire relationship sat there breathing in front of me. The affair hadn't lasted 6 months. It had lasted 11. My stomach turned so violently, I had to sit down. The earliest messages were almost playful. She complained about her dating life. He joked about living with a ghost in Scrubs. Then it evolved. Lunches became hotel rooms. Hotel rooms became weekends. Weekends became plans. There were selfies of them in restaurants I'd paid for. Pictures from a cabin trip Julian told me was a business retreat. One message from Vanessa read, I still can't believe she has no idea. And Julian replied, she notices surgeries more than people. I read that line 3 times. Then a 4th. Like repetition might somehow soften it. Instead, it split something open inside me. There were messages about me constantly. About my hours, my exhaustion, my appearance after overnight shifts, my emotionless doctor personality. Vanessa once asked him, why don't you just leave already? Julian answered, because Serena pays most of the mortgage. I stopped breathing for a second. Then came the messages that destroyed any illusion that this had been emotional confusion or temporary weakness. They were planning. Carefully. Strategically. Julian discussed waiting until certain investments matured before ending things with me. Vanessa advised him on timing. They talked about how sympathetic people would be once Julian explained how neglected he felt. At one point, Vanessa literally wrote, just make her look cold enough and everyone will side with you. And Julian responded with a laughing emoji. I sat there staring at the screen, while sunlight shifted slowly across the floor. My entire relationship suddenly looked staged. Every argument about my schedule. Every complaint. Every accusation that I wasn't emotionally available. Not random pain. Preparation. When Julian came home that evening, he immediately knew something had changed. You went through my tablet. Not even a question. I looked at him across the living room. You lied about the timeline. He rolled his eyes instantly. Oh my God. 11 months? You invaded my privacy. The sheer audacity almost impressed me. You used our shared account to pay for hotels. That's what you care about? You made me fund your affair. Julian threw his keys onto the table. You're acting like I committed murder. No, I whispered. I'm acting like the person I loved turned out to be someone else. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not shame. Annoyance. Because I was no longer reacting according to his script. You want honesty? He snapped. Fine. Vanessa actually listens to me. She makes me feel alive. You come home exhausted and emotionally numb. Do you know how lonely that is? You had choices. And you had priorities. I stared at him. He genuinely believed this. Not as an excuse. As justification. Then he said the sentence that finally killed whatever remained between us. You act like being a surgeon makes you morally superior. I laughed again, but this time tears came with it. Not because he hurt me. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Julian could not tolerate sacrifice unless he was the one receiving it. My career only mattered when it benefited him financially or socially. The moment it required patience, loyalty, or maturity from him, he reframed my dedication as cruelty. That night, I forwarded every screenshot to Clara. The next morning, Julian began his campaign. At first, it was subtle. Mutual friends texting me things like, "Maybe you guys just need counseling." Julian says he felt abandoned. He sounds heartbroken. Heartbroken. The man sleeping with another woman in hotel rooms funded by our joint account was apparently the victim. Then came the phone call from my friend, Nina. "I don't want to get involved," she said carefully. But Julian told everyone the affair was mostly emotional. I closed my eyes. Did he mention the vacations? Silence. The hotel rooms? Another silence. The financial planning? What financial planning? Exactly. He was editing the story. Curating it. In his version, he was a lonely boyfriend, driven into another woman's arms by an emotionally unavailable surgeon obsessed with work. In reality, he had spent nearly a year building an exit strategy while smiling in my face. Clara advised me not to respond emotionally. "Facts," she said. "Facts destroy manipulation faster than anger ever will." So when close friends confronted me, I showed them selective evidence. Nothing dramatic. Just enough. A hotel receipt dated during a week Julian claimed he was caring for his sick uncle. Screenshots discussing how to make me appear cold. Messages about waiting for property values to rise before leaving me. One by one, people stopped defending him. The shift was almost immediate. Because sympathy survives mistakes. It rarely survives calculation. 3 nights later, Julian cornered me in the kitchen. "What exactly are you showing people?" "The truth." "You're humiliating me." I looked at him for a very long time before answering. "No, Julian, you humiliated yourself. I'm just refusing to lie for you anymore." For the first time since I discovered the affair, he looked uncertain. Not devastated. Not remorseful. Just afraid that the narrative was slipping out of his control. And that frightened him far more than losing me ever had. 2 weeks later, the illusion finally collapsed completely. Not privately. Publicly. Clara obtained the financial records first. I was sitting in her office after a 14-hour surgery, still wearing navy scrubs beneath my coat, when she slid a folder across the desk. "You need to prepare yourself," she said quietly. I opened it. Credit card statements. Bank transfers. Travel confirmations. The numbers blurred together at first, until patterns emerged. Luxury hotel charges. Weekend resorts. Jewelry purchases. Restaurants I'd never been taken to. Over $8,000 spent on Vanessa. Using accounts connected to me. One receipt was dated the same weekend Julian had held me while I cried after losing a teenage patient during surgery complications. I remembered that weekend perfectly. I remembered apologizing to him for being emotionally distant, while he was secretly booking a waterfront suite for another woman. I stared at the documents so long, Clara finally asked, "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted honestly. "But I think I'm done being shocked." Clara gave a small nod. "There's more." Of course there was. Phone records revealed thousands of messages between Julian and Vanessa over 11 months. Hundreds of calls. Late-night conversations while I slept beside him after hospital shifts so exhausting I sometimes couldn't remember driving home. Then came the messages recovered through subpoena. Those destroyed whatever remained of my ability to see Julian as merely selfish. Because selfish people hurt you accidentally. Julian hurt me strategically. One message from Vanessa read, "She's going to look insane if she's the one who ends it." Julian answered, "That's the goal. If she leaves, everyone will think she cared more about work than love." Another, "Push her emotionally. Make her react first." And another, "You deserve someone softer than a surgeon." Julian replied, "Exactly. Serena treats life like an operating table." I felt physically cold reading them. Not because of Vanessa. Because Julian participated so eagerly. He wasn't trapped by temptation. He was collaborating in deception. The cruelest discovery came buried in a message thread from 4 months earlier. Vanessa asked him, "Do you actually love her at all?" And Julian responded, "I love what she provides. Stability, reputation, security." I stopped reading after that. For several minutes, the office disappeared around me. Everything I'd sacrificed suddenly replayed in fragments. The birthdays missed because patients coded on my table. The vacations canceled for emergencies. The nights I came home too exhausted to eat. I had believed those sacrifices were for a future we were building together. Meanwhile, Julian had apparently viewed me as infrastructure. A resource. Something stable to stand on while searching for excitement elsewhere. When I got home that evening, he was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Comfortable. Relaxed. As if our relationship were merely experiencing turbulence instead of total destruction. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced up. "You always say that like you're delivering a diagnosis." I almost smiled at the irony. "You and Vanessa planned this." His expression changed instantly. "Don't be dramatic. You discussed manipulating public perception. You strategized financially. You talked about making me look emotionally neglectful." He stood abruptly. "You subpoenaed my private conversations?" "Clara did." "That's psychotic." "No," I said quietly. "Psychotic is convincing someone they caused their own betrayal." For the first time since everything began, Julian lost control. "You think this is all my fault?" he snapped. "You abandoned this relationship years ago." "I worked." "You disappeared." "I saved lives." "And I was supposed to what? Sit quietly and admire you forever?" The rage in his voice stunned me because it sounded genuine. Not performative. Not manipulative. Genuine resentment. He hated me for needing purpose beyond him. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. Julian didn't want partnership. He wanted emotional dependency. Someone whose entire world revolved around validating his needs. And because surgery demanded pieces of me he could never own, he punished me for it. "You know what your problem is?" he continued. "Everyone worships you. Patients, colleagues, residents. You walk around like you're saving humanity." "I am saving humanity," I said, exhausted. Or at least, trying to save individual humans one at a time. He laughed bitterly. "There, that superiority complex." "No," I whispered. "That's responsibility." The silence afterward felt enormous. Then Julian said something softer. Something almost vulnerable. "I was lonely, Serena." And for one dangerous second, my heart reacted. Because loneliness is human. Pain is human. I almost wanted to comfort him out of habit. Then I remembered the messages. The planning. The manipulation. The hotel receipts. Loneliness did not force him to become cruel. Choice did. "I would have understood loneliness," I told him. "I would have fought for us if you'd been honest." He looked away first. That told me everything. 3 days later, the social consequences began. Mutual friends who initially defended Julian started calling me back with different tones in their voices. Mina cried on the phone after seeing screenshots. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He made it sound like one mistake." "It wasn't." "No," she said shakily. "It really wasn't." Another couple, Ethan and Marissa, completely cut contact with Julian after learning he'd been using private dinners with them as cover stories for seeing Vanessa. Apparently, Julian told people I was emotionally abusive for exposing the evidence. That narrative lasted exactly 48 hours before the truth overwhelmed it. Because lies require consistency. Facts do not. The biggest shock came from Julian's younger sister, Elise. She called me late one evening while I was charting patient notes. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. We met at a small cafe near the hospital. Elise looked embarrassed before she even sat down. "I owe you an apology." I blinked. "At first, I believed him," she admitted. "He said you neglected him, that you cared more about surgery than your relationship." I stirred my coffee silently. Then, Elise pulled out her phone. "He forgot I still had access to an old family cloud account." She showed me screenshots I hadn't seen before. Messages between Julian and Vanessa mocking me. Jokes about my exhaustion. Comments about how easy it was to manipulate my guilt. One message read, "She'll blame herself before she blames me. That's her personality." Vanessa responded, "Perfect. Makes everything easier." Elise looked horrified. "I knew my brother could be selfish," she whispered. "But this..." She couldn't finish. And suddenly, I realized something important. Julian had spent so long studying my empathy that he weaponized it. He knew I would question myself first. He knew I would search for ways I failed him before accepting he simply betrayed me. That was what manipulators relied on. Not weakness. Kindness. When I returned home that night, Julian was asleep on the couch. The television flickered silently across his face. For a moment, he looked peaceful. Ordinary. Like the man I used to love. Then my eyes drifted to his phone, glowing beside his hand. A new message notification appeared from Vanessa. And instead of heartbreak, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I could finally see him clearly. Not as the version I hoped existed, but as the man he actually was. 3 months after the separation, everything was finalized. The condo was sold. The joint accounts were closed. The legal agreements were signed so neatly they almost mocked the chaos that created them. In the end, Julian received far less than he expected. Clara had dismantled his financial claims piece by piece. The evidence of him using shared funds for the affair devastated his credibility, especially once it became clear he had deliberately hidden income while allowing me to shoulder larger portions of our expenses. The mediator had looked visibly irritated reviewing the receipts. Hotel suites, luxury dinners, designer gifts, all paid for while Julian insisted he was struggling financially. At one point during negotiations, he actually tried to argue that the spending had been necessary for his emotional well-being. Even his own attorney looked embarrassed. The final settlement required him to reimburse a significant portion of the affair-related expenses, not because morality could be legislated, but because financial deception could. Julian signed the documents with a tight jaw and hollow eyes. He barely looked at me. Not out of shame, out of resentment. Because even now, he believed I had ruined his life by refusing to absorb the consequences of his choices quietly. The most ironic part came 2 weeks later. Vanessa left him. Apparently, once the fantasy became reality, she lost interest almost immediately. I learned this through Nina, who still had mutual friends connected to Vanessa's social circle. She says he became clingy, Nina told me over dinner. I stared at her. Clingy. The man who once accused me of emotional abandonment was now desperately trying to hold on to the woman he'd destroyed our relationship for. What happened exactly? I asked. Nina hesitated, then sighed. Honestly, I think Vanessa liked the thrill more than Julian himself. That sounded painfully accurate, because once secrecy disappeared, so did the excitement. Without the drama of sneaking around behind my back, Julian became what he truly was underneath all the manipulation. An insecure man, desperate to feel chosen. Vanessa moved on quickly. Julian did not. A month after she left him, he started texting me again. At first, the messages seemed harmless. Hope surgery went well today. Saw your hospital featured in the news. You looked tired the last time I saw you. Then they shifted. I miss talking to you. I don't think anyone ever understood me like you did. You gave up on us too easily. That last one made me laugh out loud in the hospital parking garage. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable how committed he remained to rewriting history. I never answered. Eventually, the messages became longer, more emotional, more desperate. One arrived at 1:13 a.m. Vanessa wasn't what I thought she was. I made mistakes, but I think we both did. I still believe we had something real. I stared at the screen while rain hit my windshield. For a second, an old version of me almost surfaced. The woman who used to explain his behavior to herself. The woman who translated cruelty into pain, because pain felt easier to forgive. Then I remembered the screenshots. She'll blame herself before she blames me. And the feeling disappeared. I blocked his number that night. Not dramatically, not angrily, just permanently. Around that same time, my life began changing in quieter ways, healthier ways. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped checking my phone anxiously between surgeries. I stopped apologizing for being tired after 14-hour shifts. The guilt slowly loosened its grip on me. For years, Julian had trained me to believe my ambition injured people. But ambition was never the problem. Deception was. One evening, after a difficult surgery, I stayed late in the hospital cafeteria reviewing patient charts. Most of the building had gone quiet. That was where Adrian Cole found me. Dr. Adrian Cole was a trauma surgeon with a reputation for being unnervingly calm under pressure. We'd worked together for years without ever becoming particularly close, beyond professional respect. He set a cup of coffee beside me. "You've been here 18 hours, he said. "So have you." "Yeah, but I look better exhausted." I smiled despite myself. Adrian sat across from me, loosening his surgical cap. For a while, neither of us spoke, and strangely, the silence felt easy. Not heavy, not demanding. Easy. Finally, he asked, "How are you doing, really?" The question almost caught me off guard because there was no hidden accusation beneath it, no resentment, no test I was supposed to pass. I thought carefully before answering. "Better than I expected." He nodded once, like he understood exactly how much that sentence contained. Over the following months, friendship came first. Coffee after shifts, conversations between surgeries. Dark humor only medical professionals understood. Adrian never acted threatened by my career. He admired it because he lived the same reality. When emergencies interrupted plans, he didn't punish me emotionally for it. He simply said, "We'll reschedule." Like an adult. The difference between healthy love and manipulative love revealed itself in small moments. Julian made me feel guilty for being needed by the world. Adrian simply stood beside me in it. One night, after we'd been seeing each other casually for a while, Adrian and I sat on the rooftop terrace outside the surgical wing, watching ambulance lights flicker below the city skyline. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think being in medicine made relationships impossible." I looked at him. "What changed?" He glanced toward me with a faint smile. "I realized the problem isn't the hours. It's whether the person beside you sees sacrifice as abandonment or devotion." The words hit somewhere deep, because that had always been the real divide. Not surgery, not time. Values. Julian viewed love as constant emotional servicing. I viewed love as commitment through difficult seasons. And no amount of compromise could bridge fundamentally opposite definitions of loyalty. About 6 months after the breakup, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Julian's professional reputation had deteriorated badly. Several freelance clients stopped working with him after discovering he'd lied about business expenses connected to the affair. Apparently, people became uncomfortable trusting someone whose entire personal life operated like a marketing campaign. His social circle shrank too. Not because people hated him, because eventually, manipulation exhausts everyone around it. Even his parents, who initially blamed me for working too much, stopped defending him once the full truth emerged. His mother sent me a handwritten note, apologizing for judging me without understanding the situation. I never responded, but I appreciated it more than she probably realized. The strangest part of healing wasn't anger fading. It was indifference arriving. One afternoon, nearly 8 months after everything collapsed, I saw Julian unexpectedly outside a coffee shop downtown. He looked older. Not physically, emotionally. Like disappointment had settled into his posture permanently. He noticed me immediately. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he walked over slowly. "Serena." I nodded politely. "How have you been?" "Good." There was a long silence. He glanced at the manila folder under my arm. "Still working nonstop?" "Yes." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Guess some things never change." "No," I said calmly. Some things finally became clear. That seemed to hit him harder than anger would have. He looked like he wanted to say more, maybe apologize, maybe blame me again, maybe both. But in the end, all he asked was, "Are you happy?" And for the first time in a very long time, the answer came easily. Yes. Real happiness, I realized, did not require shrinking myself to protect someone else's ego. It did not demand guilt as proof of love. It did not ask me to betray my values to keep another person comfortable. Julian once called his affair stress relief, emotional support, as though changing the language could change the betrayal itself. But truth has a way of surviving euphemisms. Cheating was still cheating. Manipulation was still manipulation. And love built on deception eventually collapses under the weight of reality. Looking back now, I no longer see the end of our relationship as a tragedy. I see it as escape. because losing Julian forced me to confront something painful but necessary. Some people don't love your heart. They love your usefulness. And once you recognize the difference, you never confuse the two again.